Live from the mist-enshrouded mountaintop fortress that is X and Y Communications headquarters, you're listening to the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. And now, here's your host, Scott McKay.
Hello out there, gentlemen, and welcome to yet another episode of the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. I am your host, Scott McKay, at Scott McKay on Twitter and Clubhouse. You can find me on YouTube by searching my name, Scott McKay, with one T, and finding some YouTube videos not only that are visual representations of this show, but on lots of other salient points related to women and dating. If you are on the World Wide Web, our URL is always the same, and it's mountaintoppodcast.com. And if you aren't yet a member of our Facebook group, the Mountaintop Summit, you're missing out, gentlemen. There's a lot of guys out there who are talking about a lot of fun, entertaining topics related to being a better man. So definitely join us at the Mountaintop Summit on Facebook. With me today for what I count on being a very interesting show is a gentleman named Larry Forletta of Forletta Investigations. He's out of Pittsburgh, PA, and he is a specialist in all sorts of areas. But today specifically, we're going to address the topic of your personal safety, and we're going to talk about a lot of different subtopics related to that, and I'm really excited about it. So without anything further, Larry, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, thanks, Scott. Thanks for having me on your show today.
Yeah, you know, I found out about you when your publicist contacted me because you're doing the circuit here with podcasts and all sorts of media. And I found what you did extremely interesting because you are basically a private investigator, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yes. I mean, there have been so many different TV shows and movies about PIs, and it's kind of a romanticized business, isn't it? Yet, I happen to know from having a friend or two in your line of work that it's actually a whole lot of waiting punctuated by a moment or two of sheer terror here and there. So, I mean, tell us a little bit about the PI business before we get rolling.
Well, let me just back up a minute so that your audience will understand a little bit about my background. I have about 30 years of law enforcement experience. I started out with the Maryland State Police, and then I retired from the Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA. And then I went into my own private investigation business. And from there, then we've handled a variety of different types of investigations and different situations. But one thing I try to get people to understand that the private investigator is not the private investigator that you may see on TV or in the movies.
Right, exactly. So what does a private investigator actually do?
Well, there's a variety of things that a private investigator actually does. And we'll start with the typical one, and that's called surveillance. We watch people, follow people. It could be on maybe a domestic case or civil type case. We also interview witnesses, do on a criminal defense side. So there's a variety of things and a variety of clients that we work with.
Now, you also mentioned you work for the DEA. Was that in the United States or abroad?
Most of my time was spent in the United States, but I did work investigations in Mexico and Guatemala.
So anybody who's ever watched the TV show Narcos on Netflix, was that a pretty solid representation of what you guys actually did?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, it is.
Amazing.
In fact, I had the two gentlemen that Netflix was based on are retired DEA agents who I had them on my show. And yes, it's pretty accurate. Although there's some Hollywood stuff in there, but for the most part, it's pretty accurate.
Yeah, for sure. They're always going to dress it up a little bit for the camera, but it's a great show. I highly recommend it if guys haven't watched it. It seems like every season is better than the last.
Yeah.
Yeah, the two most recent seasons are specifically about Mexico, and I think, frankly, they're the best two seasons. Not to say that the original three, which took place in Colombia, were not all that great. They were fantastic, but I think that's one of the best shows on television. So it's fascinating to me that you have direct experience there and you're saying, yeah, some of that's kind of true to life. So you've seen it all, you've done it all, and you know all about how to keep safe vis-a-vis all of that. So why don't we get down to some of the ideas that are probably on guys' minds? We live in a world nowadays where some people believe we should have guns to protect ourselves. Some people think, maybe the Second Amendment goes too far and we don't necessarily need an AR-15. How should men feel about weapons in terms of arming themselves? Or should it be more about learning how to fight or learning Brazilian jiu-jitsu? Or what combination thereof, in your opinion, will be the best cocktail to ensure that we know how to protect ourselves as well as our family?
One of the first things about personal safety is really common sense. And I'll just say common sense, as I define it, is sound and prudent judgment based on a simple perception of the situation or facts. So does every situation do you need a firearm? Or every situation do you need pepper spray? So that's what it all comes down to. And I could tell people, if you're going to carry a weapon, you better be trained on how to use it. And you're going to be making split decisions on the use of a weapon. So you have to get training. I'm 100% for training and teaching people about the do's and don'ts with a weapon, because it is deadly. When somebody is attacking you, and under our Constitution, you have a right to defend yourself. So that's where the issues come up.
Now, when I took concealed carry training, I was surprised at how much of that training had nothing to do with the gun and everything to do with the social engineering, as it were, of a crisis situation such that you would never need to use that gun.
Yeah, it just depends on where you go to get your training. I know there's a lot of places that will go hands-on, actually teaching you about the safety and the uses of firearms. The one thing when you're trained, when you have the type of training that I have, so not only do you know the ins and outs of a weapon, but you also know how to protect that weapon being taken from you, which could happen. And so I tell people, use good judgment, common sense, and the weapon, a firearm weapon, is used as the very last resort.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, there may be civil lawsuits tied with whatever personal injury or death you caused with that weapon, even if you were in the right by brandishing it and or using it.
Well, for the most part, if you do shoot and kill somebody in an area of self-defense, depending on your state statute, people can still sue you, or the family can still sue you for a wrongful death lawsuit.
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen that happen several times in the news just here in our local town here, San Antonio. It happened in the next neighborhood over. We have castle laws here in San Antonio, which means if someone invades your space, you can shoot them. And he found two kids one night breaking into his Ford Explorer, and he capped them. That was open to a lot of debate, especially socio-political debate. And based on what you just said, I'm reminded of something else that my concealed carry instructor told me, which is contrary to romanticized popular belief that, you often see in the movies or TV or whatever. Most gunfights are going to take place within very close range. You're being physically attacked and the guy pulls his gun and defends himself, kind of reminiscent of what happened with Kyle Rittenhouse in Kenosha, Wisconsin. And it's still going to be very much up to debate, but it's not exactly like you need to know how to, put 3 shots in the head from 200 yards. It's more like you got to know how to handle this gun when someone is actually on top of you attacking you. And, I know that's something that's at the heart of what they teach women about self-defense, fending off an attacker or fending off a potential rapist. But, it applies to us as men, too. Most of our attacks are going to be at pretty close range, right?
Well, most close range shootings are within 5 to 10 feet. In the law enforcement circle, you're taught that nobody should come into anywhere near you within 20 feet, because that's really a danger zone for most attacks, even somebody that has a knife. So most close range shootings, like I said, are usually closer, but you'll see why sometimes in a law enforcement shooting, if somebody goes within that 20 feet, that's a danger zone for self-defense.
So somebody's threatening you and they come within that circle. Is that when you try actively to de-escalate the violence vis-a-vis the fact that you're carrying?
Well, yeah, I think at that point, when you say de-escalate, if you're pulling your weapon on somebody, it just escalated, because once you pull your weapon on somebody, they'll either listen to you or they won't. And if they start coming at you, that's when you have to defend yourself.
So you would say if someone is an active threat and they come within 20 feet of you, you would recommend brandishing the weapon?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Just wanted to be clear on that, because a lot of people are seeing the Kyle Rittenhouse example on television, and obviously it's politically loaded, but the guy's on his back with a guy about to curb stomp him, basically, and crunch his jaw. And that's a self-defense situation. And I think where it gets politically loaded is people are saying, well, the kid was too young to have a gun and he shouldn't have been there to begin with, which is kind of beside the point once, it's crunch time, right?
Well, self-defense is self-defense, and I think that young man has a good chance of getting through those charges.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But what about this idea of keeping yourself away from potentially violent situations to begin with in the realm of personal safety? I mean, that's a no-brainer too, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I talk about common sense, I mean, in life, there's sometimes that you can just avoid things, and sometimes you're better off avoiding things with those type of situations.
Like, yeah, if you're out with a woman in your life, you don't walk her down a dark alley and say, you know what can happen, right? You don't go into the worst, most violent bar in the worst part of town and start picking fights with dudes, hoping you'll get out alive. You don't go looking for riots and start provoking the police, hoping something good will come out of it. I mean, these are all common sense personal safety ideals, right?
Oh, yes. No doubt about it.
Yeah. So give us some other ways that men should think about their personal safety and perhaps ways that they don't usually.
I think a lot of us are so used to not paying attention to our surroundings, which is the key. You should know where you're at. You should look around you. And, a lot of people are on their cell phones or they're text messaging or they're doing a variety of things that can be distracting. And so when a perpetrator is looking, they're looking for signs of weaknesses. They're looking for signs of when you're not at your all and watching and knowing what's going around you. So I always recommend to people, stay off texting, walk, with your head on a swivel. Doesn't mean you have to be paranoid, but just in a sense that you know where you're at and what you're doing.
Everybody I know who has ever been a law enforcement officer or has served in active duty in the military always sits facing the door when they go to a restaurant.
That's right. That's true.
For that very reason. Yeah.
I do the same thing.
Yeah, I do too. I've learned that lesson. Sure. Yeah. Makes sense. If you're looking at the wall, you can't tell what's going on behind you and you can't be a very good protector now, can you?
Well, no doubt about it.
Yeah. What about driving? A lot of young guys, we're young, dumb, full of cum, and we drive like maniacs trying to impress women and each other. And that's not very safe, is it? Is it worth it?
No, I don't think it is. Being stupid and driving could cost you your life because whoever you upset on the other end may have a weapon and may decide to shoot you. So, yeah, that kind of unnecessary behavior is not good.
Yeah, a friend of a friend just lost his life in a road rage incident.
Right.
Yeah. How easy is it to get into a road rage incident, and what typically triggers those events?
Well, usually it's, somebody pulling in front of somebody or somebody cutting somebody off, and now they're giving each other the finger, and now they're swearing, and now, the tension is starting. And, sometimes they say cooler heads prevail, which is, you'll know a lot of military and law enforcement guys who will just sit back and watch and observe versus trying to be the aggressor because they're trained that way. And so when people get into these road rage situations, it's just unfortunate. And many people have lost their lives over it.
Now, not to say too much about this particular case, but apparently what happened was the guy was driving with his wife, got into a road rage situation. And once the two men got out of the car, the other driver laid hands on his wife, which caused him to draw his weapon, and the other guy was quicker on the draw and killed him.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate part about that.
Yeah, it was an extremely unfortunate incident. And it brings up the idea of protecting the woman we're with, not just her physical protection, but protecting her honor. How far is too far? I mean, a lot of guys are saying to themselves, well, you know what? If someone disrespects my wife, I got to stand up for that. And I would actually tend to agree with that. I mean, you have to handle things on a case-by-case basis.
Right.
But if a guy starts laying hands on my wife, I got to do something.
Oh, I agree. That changes the whole perspective versus him making stupid comments and then putting his hands on somebody. Now we're getting into an actual assault, a crime being committed. And that's where we go right back to the old adage of self-defense. Obviously you're protecting a loved one. I mean, I've even seen myself in a situation, even when I was a Maryland State Trooper, where some idiot made a stupid comment to my wife, and I went and snatched him up. And, of course, when you're 26 years old versus when you're 66 is a big difference. So there are situations, and I think the older you get, the more, you begin to realize a lot of different things.
Yeah, the first thing I thought of when you said that is I think I would probably take the 66-year-old guy more seriously than the 26-year-old.
Well,
physical prowess isn't everything. Sometimes when these guys are, the old bull on the hill, they're a lot wilier and they know what they're doing and they don't step in unless they mean it,
Yeah, I agree with you on that.
Yes. By the way, just as a total tangent, I grew up in Maryland, and Maryland state police cars always had the most unique colorways in the entire United States of America. Always.
Yeah, they sure did.
Yeah. They went from dark green and black to kind of a beige, pale yellow when I was a kid. And apparently they're back to the old school dark green and black, which I don't know of any other state in the union that has such uniquely painted state police cars, but they certainly stand out.
Well, yeah, and they were designed to match the uniform in the color code. But when I was a Maryland trooper, our cars were yellow.
Yeah, right. The pale yellow ones, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I remember them very well. One of my friends, his dad was a Maryland state trooper. Yeah, he actually came and spoke to us at school and had the green uniform. Yeah, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I completely remember it. And of course, I'm a biased opinion being a Marylander, being a Baltimorean myself,
Yeah,
but
love Baltimore.
Yeah, but Maryland has the greatest flag.
Oh, yeah.
Entire
absolutely.
union. Oh, yeah. And so anytime you put the Maryland flag on something, it immediately pops more and just stands out and looks great. Like the Ravens field, you can love or hate the Ravens, but man, that flag looks good on everything. I actually had the chance to fly on Southwest Airlines 737 that was painted like the Maryland flag, and I was so proud of myself.
Yeah, I've actually seen that plane at several different airports. One I noticed was when I was out in Las Vegas, I saw it and couldn't believe it.
Yeah, well, that's where I actually flew from. I flew from Las Vegas to San Antonio on that airplane, of all places. Yeah. Flew out of McCarran. Yeah, for sure. But anyway, we got off on a tangent there. But a little relief there from something so serious. I want to shift gears here and talk specifically about women in a different light. And apologies to my listeners if it feels like I'm sneaking up on them with this, because I have a feeling that if I did an entire show on this, guys would roll their eyes and go, well, that doesn't apply to me. Lots of us are macho guys out there. But when you hear the term domestic violence, most people's imagination turns immediately to some guy beating up a woman. But the threat of domestic violence against men is very real, isn't it, Larry?
Oh, there's no doubt about that.
How does that look, typically?
Well, it could look a couple ways. One, the mental abuse, and two, believe this or not, physical abuse. I happen to see the both sides of that when I was a Maryland State Trooper on domestic calls that we went to. I've also seen them in some of my private investigation cases where, a woman actually assaulted her husband, and that person subsequently died later on. But yes, it's real. And I don't think anybody should take the domestic violence for either side because, yes, traditionally it's been looked upon that the women are the most abused and the men weren't. And now I think there's a different light involving men being abused.
Yet there are still far fewer resources for men who are experiencing domestic violence. Is that because perhaps men are too proud to admit it or just try to buck up or have somehow bought into this social meme that women are always angelic and they're always in the right and men are always the toxic aggressors? I mean, it just seems like there's a whole set of psychological ideas there that can really play havoc on a man's psyche, even if he is openly being abused, that he would either, feel like some kind of wuss for admitting to it or somehow being gaslit into believing he's the problem, even though he's the one being abused. No?
I think it's all about society and how people look at things. So all of us, grew up a certain way. We were taught always to respect women. And I think on the other hand, you see now there's a trend of looking at women maybe a little bit more differently than they did 30, 40 years ago about, them working, staying at home and taking care of the kids versus going out and having a livelihood and things of that nature. And then on the other hand, some roles have changed. There's men that actually stay home and watch their kids while their wife goes to work. And I happen to have friends that do that. Even in my generation, it's kind of hard to believe. But yeah, it does happen. I think there's too much stereotyping about the male.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, anybody who's ever watched The Godfather will remember the scene where she's just throwing plates at him, trying to kill him. You know what I mean? That would kind of classify as female domestic assault against the guy. Yeah. I mean, no matter how hardcore he pissed her off, which if you remember the movie was legit, you know, she didn't have the right to respond in violence in quite that manner. Yet, you know, there it is on the silver screen, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, how would men protect their reputation and their freedom, vis-a-vis maybe a woman who is wrongly accusing him of abuse? I have another friend who the wife abused him, and when the cops came, she pointed the finger at him and they hauled him off. That's a pretty extreme example, but it does happen. How do we protect ourselves from women who would level perhaps false claims against us for whatever reason? I mean, I know basically we're in believe all women mode around here, and the governor of New York is currently in trouble because he said believe all women. Now the women accusing him need to be believed, and he doesn't want to believe them when it doesn't suit his purposes. Sure. But all that really points to is how complicated this all has gotten. And I know, right or wrong, politically loaded or not, whether you guys or some of you ladies lurking on this show, you know, which you're welcome to do, by the way, ladies. We love having you. We love you. We're not ashamed of what we talk about around here. Regardless of how you feel about it, there are a lot of men listening to the show within the sound of our voices, Larry, who really fear this. They're like, man, you know, I am one step away from being handcuffed and hauled away just because a woman leveled something against me. I mean, the Kavanaugh case scared not only men, chilling us to our core, but I heard a lot of mamas going, my goodness, how do I protect my sons from this sort of thing? It's just a freaking firestorm, and it doesn't seem like due process has any place in it. So what's a guy to do, Larry?
Let's go back to the settings and where, let's say, for example, there's a domestic call and the wife claims that the husband struck her, and the husband says, hey, I didn't lay a hand on her. So now you have to look at the physical evidence to see if that's the case. And believe me, I went on calls where those type of accusations were made. And so as an investigator, you have to look at the facts in front of you, and if there's some credibility coming out from, quote unquote, the alleged victim. And here's another concern for mothers with their sons: are false sexual accusations on college campus assaults, which I've handled quite a bit of those. So yes, it's a tough situation to be in when people make a false accusation against you, but at the end of the day, you have to be able to defend yourself. And when it comes to violence between a man and a woman, I always tell them, just leave, go away till things cool down and try to get it resolved.
100%. Gentlemen, you all already know this. You don't need Larry and I to tell you, but you will never, ever come out in any other way except on the short end of the stick anytime there's a physical altercation with a woman. You cannot win that. I mean, if you walk away from an altercation with a woman, it is in your best interest. I mean, your homies may say to you, you know what, you're pussing out and she's got the best of you. Fine. At least you're not going to jail. And they're being stupid because you do not win a heated altercation with any woman. I mean, some guys may be thinking, okay, well, I'm going to get into an argument with my wife. Well, you know, if the two of you trust each other enough that you can have a spat, that's different than a woman out in public saying, yeah, you know what? You think you're so bad. Why don't you come and hit me? Or maybe she hits you first. Yeah, just walk away. Just walk away. You cannot win that. You know, Larry, I think it carries a lot of gravitas when a guy who has your LEO experience, a DEA experience, and you're a professional investigator and you do this stuff for a living says, guys, you can walk away from that. Jocko Willink's company supports this show, and I have heard Jocko, who is probably the most military guy who's ever militaried,
yep.
And indeed a macho dude who has nothing to prove physically to anybody, has said to the effect on his show, you know, there really has to be quite a hill to fight on before I'm willing to fight it. You know, there Exactly. are so many things he lets go under the bridge, these little microaggressions and some nut job, little wet behind the ears chirp trying to break bad with them or cutting line in front of them, or someone just trying to start stuff and he just lets it go. I'm kind of reminded of something that happened that was fascinating to both of us when my wife Emily and I went on safari in East Africa. The male lions are basically unflappable. You can pull a Land Rover right up next to them, like 10 feet away, and they'll just kind of look up, kind of like a kitty cat would, and just kind of blink its eyes and slowly turn its head like, yeah, you got nothing. I have nothing to prove to you. You're not going to come any closer. You can't hurt me. And if you contrast that almost regal confidence in one's ability to hold one's own space and not be affected by, petty aggression, it makes that lion, and indeed makes that mature person, that much more impressive. All these guys who, like we described before, are young, dumb, and full of cum and feel like they got to fight anybody who disrespects them. And you always see these young guys, actors, people who are rather self-important, professional athletes. When they feel disrespected, they feel like they got to lash out and fight for it. All that does is lower their level of respect and makes them look weaker, not stronger. So there's this element of being able to withstand the stuff that just doesn't really matter in life, and have enough self-awareness and self-confidence to realize you have nothing to prove to these people and it just isn't worth it, right?
And that's something that I mentioned early on. Again, back to the law enforcement and military. I mean, you're trained to handle things a certain way. I remember in 1979, there was a nice winter snowstorm in the city of Baltimore, and we were sent in because I was on the Maryland State Police tactical team. We were sent in to quell a disturbance because they were looting in downtown Baltimore in the Gay Street Mall. And, we handled every situation.
Just to clarify for guys who aren't from Baltimore, Gay Street is the name of the street.
Yeah.
Yeah, this has nothing to do with gay culture or anything.
Oh, no.
It's actually Gay Street.
Yeah, we
capital
call
G.
Yeah, it's the Gay Street Mall. It was mostly owned by minority businesses in the downtown Baltimore area.
Yeah, I know where it is.
Sure. Right, sure. And so, we handled every situation different. But when you're in that type of a disturbance, you have to take the situation under control. Same thing in coal miner strikes and other type of civil disturbances that I've been into. So every situation is different, but you have to be able to understand and control that situation, and that means including yourself.
Kind of to wrap this up, Larry, what advice would you give a guy who's been inspired by this show to learn how to protect himself better and to increase his level of personal safety? What are some practical ways we can do that?
Well, the practical way is going back to what I originally said about common sense. Avoid confrontation if you can. That's probably the best way to protect and preserve yourself. And if you are going to go into the situation, you better know how to defend yourself. Usually, if you're going to use a weapon, you better know how to use a weapon. Because, in today's world, nobody fights anymore with their fist. They fight with a weapon. And there's no hesitation anymore about shooting somebody. So walk away as best as you can. Defend yourself when you have to.
That's really a profound statement, because you hear a lot of guys preaching the benefits of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or Krav Maga because it increases our confidence and our ability to defend ourselves. But, it's kind of like the scene from the original Indiana Jones movie where the guy is coming at him with, whips and nunchucks, and then basically just takes out a pistol and caps him, and that's the end of that.
Right.
That's kind of like a metaphor for how it goes nowadays, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Wow, that's really an interesting thought. I mean, not that training in martial arts or Krav Maga wouldn't help you defend yourself in a situation where there isn't a gun. And of course, it's indeed great for your confidence and your fitness. But man, you almost have to assume, especially in my neck of the woods here in Texas, that everybody's got a gun.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And so, what are you going to do? Are you going to go get one of your own and defend yourself? Or, are you going to be caught empty-handed, literally? Fill your hands, you sons of bitches. Remember that movie?
Yeah.
True Grit. All right. So anyway, his name is Larry Forletta. He's from Forletta Investigations, and you can save all your 4-letter word jokes because he's heard them all. We talked about that. But Forletta, Larry Forletta. And you can go to his website by clicking the link on the show notes page, or also by going to mountaintoppodcast.com/PI, as in private investigator. That's mountaintoppodcast.com/PI. Larry, this has been a fantastic conversation, and one that I think is absolutely essential for men to have nowadays. And you know what? It's been very thought-provoking and in some ways poignant, and I'm glad you dropped by today. Thank you so much.
Scott, it was an honor to be on your show, and thanks for having me.
Well, it's an honor for you to be on, sir, and thank you for your service all these years. And guys, if you have not recently visited mountaintoppodcast.com, you can see what the aforementioned Jocko Willink has in store for you at Origin in Maine. And it's everything from the greatest jeans you've ever worn to the greatest supplements you've ever tried in your life. You will feel healthier immediately. I've been using Origin Labs supplements now for about a year, and I tell you what, I've never felt better. They have a D3 supplement that acts as a wonderful prophylactic against COVID-19. So much more there. Go to the Origin in Maine link at mountaintoppodcast.com. And when you do, enter the code MOUNTAIN10 for 10% off your order. You can do likewise with the Mountain 10 code when you go visit the guys at Hero Soap. My main man, Lucas Rui, has various scents of his now world famous Hero Soap that you can partake of. And also the best body wash you've ever tried in your entire life. Let me tell you something. This is not like Axe body wash. It doesn't smell like, a wet behind the ears teenager. You will smell like a real man once you use this. And I have told you guys before, and I will stand behind my claim, that if you ever find yourself taking a shower with a pretty woman, you're going to want to wash each other off with this stuff. That's all I'm going to say. You're going to have to find out the rest of the details for yourself. But when you go visit herosoap.com using the link from mountaintoppodcast.com, you'll be able to get you some, try it, and I'm sure you'll be a believer also. And with that, until I talk to you again next time on the Mountaintop Podcast, this is Scott McKay from X&Y Communications. Be good out there.
The Mountaintop Podcast is produced by X&Y Communications. All rights reserved worldwide. Be sure to visit www.mountaintoppodcast.com for show notes. And while you're there, sign up for the free X&Y Communications newsletter for men. This is Ed Roy Odom speaking for the Mountaintop Podcast.